One of the girls said, "Has anyone seen Abby?" And I remember thinking at first that, she's just had a baby. Sometimes you do just want to get away from the world and just go for a walk.
I don't think she took her purse or handbag, so she's got no financial means of support. We've just got a young woman who has disappeared into the night.
Within 2 hours, something just didn't feel right.
And I'm reporting from Barnsley this afternoon, following the discovery of a body.
I remember just thinking, no, because this doesn't happen in our town, and it doesn't happen to a girl like her. She's too nice. Surely it has to be some kind of sick prank.
It just got worse and worse, each little bit of extra information that come out of it.
Was he trying to force himself on her sexually and she was rebuffing him? And that brought his rage to the fore? I don't know. But what I do know is the story he gave was wrong, it was false, and it was given to hide the real truth.
Nestled at the edge of West Yorkshire sits the tight-knit community of Castleford.
Castleford is very generation-based. I can trace back my family to 200 years living in Castleford. So we do tend to stick to his roots.
I'd describe Castleford as a brilliant place to live. There's certain parts of Castleford, if you set yourself up at a high point, you can see for miles. Yeah, you can see all the way over to Leeds, and you can see all the way to Emley Moor. Yeah, you're just in the heart of England, I guess. It's a sort of lovely place to be and feel safe around, actually. Yeah.
Probably what it's known for most famously is Castleford Tigers, the rugby league team in the Super League.
So a typical newspaper headline for Castleford would probably be something like "Police make arrest as person hit by car," but something that could happen in any place at any time.
In terms of sort of crime, don't hear a lot, from the Castleford area.
The safe neighbourhood is the perfect place to raise a family, and it's where 29-year-old schoolteacher Abby Fisher grew up.
Abby's parents were foster parents, so she had a lot of people coming in and out of the home, but it was a very tight family, very loving, very caring. I was 11 years old when I first met Abby. There was a small group of us that kind of latched onto each other because we were all very quiet, very shy, and then once we got to know each other, we were like thick as thieves, really. Abby was very, very well behaved, probably because of her wanting to be a teacher when she grew up. No one had a negative word to say about her. She was absolutely lovely.
While still at school, Abby met her future husband, Matthew.
When Abby first told me that she had a bit of a crush on Matthew, I had a bit of a laugh. I'm like, oh, really? It's more like to me, more of a bit too quiet, but I was like, are you sure? She's like, oh yeah, I really, really like him. And I'm like, oh, bless you, bless your heart. So they got into a relationship towards the back end of year 11, so we were about 14, 15, that kind of age. And I can't actually remember a moment where we was like, right, we're together now. It just seemed to just gradually happen, and it just faded in, and we just knew that they were together, really. He was quiet, he was very polite, very generous and very caring. Much like Abby, if you wanted help, he would gladly give it to you. And I think that's what's the main thing that drew them together. Even teachers commented on the fact that, they're together because they used to, walk around school holding hands and things like that. And to be fair, when you're at school, relationships, you just think, they're not going to last long. But there's just something about how they're connected that just seemed, you thought that that's a relationship that's just going to last. Abby's parents absolutely loved Matthew. They considered him to be kind of like a bit of a surrogate son to him.
Matt and Abby's relationship continued to flourish through school and college. And when Abby fulfilled her dream of becoming a primary school teacher, Matt was by her side.
Abby's always expressed that she wanted to be a teacher. She was very academically driven, and she used to always say that she wanted to help, especially the younger children. She knuckled down and focused on getting a career done.
Everything was falling into place for the couple, and so taking the next step in their relationship seemed inevitable.
Abby and Matt got engaged in 2012, and then by 2017 they were married. Abby was very much your typical white wedding, your traditional white wedding kind of girl. But I remember her big dream was to get married on this big cruise ship, and that's why she got married. Abby's parents couldn't have wished for a better man to look after their daughter.
Life was good for Abby. Married to her high school sweetheart and having landed her dream job, there was just one thing left to make their lives complete.
I think Abby's knew very early on that she wanted a family. She was very family orientated. I think that is because of her upbringing, where she was used to a lot of children being around. And I remember having a discussion with her, and she was saying, I can't wait to be a mum. It's the one thing that I want in this world. She says, if nothing else, that's what I want.
But Abby and Matt struggled to conceive and make the difficult decision to start IVF.
While Abby was going through IVF, it's a very intrusive procedure, and she was that determined and that focused to have a child that she kind of blocked everything else out. It's very nasty kind of injections and things like that. So I don't know how she did it, but she was determined she was going to do it. We all kind of bubble wrapped her a little bit, because it is. I do know it's a treatment that can be very mentally exhausting as well as physically exhausting.
But the treatment is ultimately successful, and on their third round of IVF, Abby falls pregnant with the child she has longed for.
She was absolutely ecstatic. She was nearly bursting into tears. She was just like, I can't wait, it's so exciting. With Matthew, he was very focused on Abby. From what I'd seen on Facebook and what Abby had said, that he were absolutely over the moon. Nervous, as all first-time parents are, but he was very excited to become a dad.
When their baby daughter arrives, Abby is elated.
Everyone was just so absolutely amazed because she was one of those women that you could tell she was just a natural born mum. Seeing how excited she was to be a mum. I remember her messaging me saying, this sleep regression's a pain and stuff like any advice on how to get her to sleep through at night and stuff like that. But then she'd be posting all over Facebook, first time that she'd eaten more of a solid food and stuff like that.
Matt and Abby embrace parenthood and soon start to take their daughter to local parent and baby classes.
I was sat usually at the opposite side of the hall to Abby. She just looked absolutely besotted with a little girl and just really, really happy. I take my hats off to anybody that's out and about with a new baby. Just to get out the door at first is a massive challenge. You're sleep deprived and the checklist of things that you've got to do before you leave the house, it's a big thing. So they looked like they were just settling into parenthood like we all do. They just came across as just kind of new parents enjoying the journey. Each time I saw Abby, she was at a class with her husband as a family unit. They looked so happy together and they were filming the daughter. It's a lovely memory to snap on your iPhone and play back. Yeah, I could see them doing that over and over again.
Once you've had a baby, your relationship with your partner kind of does get put to one side because you are fully focused on looking after this little baby that can't look after itself. But I know that for a fact that they were very doting parents and they were very focused on bringing her up.
But just days after Matt and Abby celebrate their daughter's christening, friends and family get some worrying news.
I remember reading on Matt's Facebook something along the lines of, has anyone seen Abby? If you have, can you contact me?
Matt not only posts online to alert friends and family, he also informs police of Abby's disappearance.
Matthew said that he woke up on the morning the 9th, the baby daughter was next to him in bed and that Abby was missing.
And I remember at first not really worrying about it because I thought, she's a first-time mum going through IVF. It's a very, stressful thing being a new parent. And I just thought that maybe she just wants to get out, go for a walk, kind of like clear her head and things like that.
There are quite regular missing from home reports. Most are very short term, and most have an explanation behind them. I mean, some of the common reasons that people go missing is relationship breakdowns, husband and wife, fallouts, debt. These are probably among the most common reasons why people will go missing, and most are found very quickly and have not come to any harm. But that's not always the case.
In the West Yorkshire town of Castleford, new mum Abby Fisher has been reported missing by husband Matt. As friends worry that the pressure of caring for a newborn is taking its toll on Abby, concerning details of her disappearance emerge.
Matthew said that he woke up on the morning of the 9th, the baby daughter was next to him in bed, and that Abby was missing. So that raises the suspicion level straight away. And why would she leave a baby daughter? To Abby particularly, this was a precious birth. It's a very, very difficult treatment to go through his IVF, and I would have been suspicious that she'd left a daughter. I wouldn't have expected a mother to act like that.
I remember once the news broke that Abby had gone missing, within a couple of hours we just sensed that something wasn't quite right.
We first heard about the missing person appeal for Abby through West Yorkshire Police. Matthew told police when he reported Abby as a missing person that Abby had gone and that she hadn't taken her car, and that she also hadn't taken her phone as well.
I don't think she took her purse or handbag, so she's got no financial means of support. The red flags are waving, they're blowing in the wind by this stage for me.
One of the things that kind of got me a little bit suspicious was the fact that Abby did not go anywhere without a phone. She typically had a phone glued to her at all times, and also the fact that she had an inhaler and her inhaler was left behind, and she was obviously very conscious that if I'm going to go for a walk I need my inhaler just in case anything triggers.
Once you've established that there has been no contact with family or friends, then you're thinking, this doesn't seem right.
So Abby Fisher is a school teacher. She's a mum to a young child, 6-month-old baby girl. And ultimately she's a wife as well, a family person, very close to her family, her mum and dad. And from what we've heard about the family, they had a really close bond.
You would have expected she'd have contacted her parents. She was very close to her parents, but no contact there.
As the community becomes increasingly alarmed, friends and family organise a search party alongside police.
Originally, it was our little friend group that was saying, right, who's free, is anyone available? We'll just walk the usual routes where Abby goes. And one of our other friends set up a Facebook group and tagged Abby's Facebook and Matt's Facebook. And we were sharing it everywhere, saying, listen, if anyone's free, do you mind, these are the routes that we know Abby typically likes to walk on. And everyone, even if they didn't know who she was, there were strangers that were saying, we're free, we're going to come and help you find her.
My first way of knowing about it was from social media. There was a post on there about people meeting up to try and search for Abby, and there was a picture of her. And straight away I recognised her face. So that was taking place on the Saturday in the town centre of Castleford. People were trying to use their best efforts to find him. Everything went viral basically in more of a way than I've ever seen anything kick off before, because the whole community wanted to find her, and obviously such a respected teacher and well-loved friend, mum. It was just, I could see that it was already attracting massive attention. It got a lot of people, and obviously the police were involved.
And then we of course heard about teachers from the school who were out looking for Abby. There were night searches for Abby, people using their phone torches to try and find any trace of her and where she could be.
And trying to sort of think of ways that we could help find her, places that might not have been checked. Her house wasn't far from the river, so it crossed my mind could a body be in that river because it's literally like a stone's throw from where she lived. We'd had an absolute massive heat wave that weekend. So I remember being in our back garden, temperatures, I think they'd got up to like 38, 42 roundabout. And he was thinking, if somebody's missing this time, how are they going to be surviving with all, like, fluids? And we're just thinking, you know, where is she? We're all struggling with this sweltering heat. Wonder where she is, wonder if she's getting a drink, wonder if, you know, if somebody's having some sort of mental breakdown or, you know, a really bad episode. How is it, you know, have they got access to basics, or have they got some comfort, or whereabouts could she be?
As the search for missing Abby continues, Matt and Abby's family are doing their best to support one another.
Matthew is sitting with Abby's parents at their home, just listening for news, because they don't know what's happened.
As Abby's family wait, Matt raises a chilling possibility to her parents.
And we know that Matthew as well, once he'd called Abby's parents to their home, he actually joined Abby's father on a search for Abby herself. At that point, Matthew told Abby's father that she'd been considering taking her own life.
That's a possibility which could never be discounted.
I think everybody was going along the lines of possibly postnatal depression, because it's so soon after having a newborn child, but it just didn't sort of make sense at all, because you could see how in love they were with the little girl, and she didn't have the demeanour of somebody that looked, I'd say, depressed, or that looked like they were really, really struggling. It was not somebody that you'd think could just take herself away in the middle of the night and sort of commit suicide, which is kind of what everybody was thinking, I think.
As fears for Abby's safety grow, so do concerns for her husband, Matt.
We were concerned for his welfare as well, because if your wife has gone out of the home and possibly taken their own life or missing, how would that make the remaining parent feel left with child on your own? So from our perspective, we want to know that the little baby was all right and that he was doing all right.
As the community rallies, the news everyone has been dreading comes from the police, who had been searching undergrowth adjacent to a lay-by in Brierley, South Yorkshire.
We just know that police found Abby's body partially covered in bushes.
I remember just sitting for a while and just thinking, no, because this doesn't happen, especially in our town, and it doesn't happen to a girl like her. She's too nice. Surely there's something. It has to be some kind of like sick prank, but yeah, it definitely hit. And that night, I didn't even sleep that night. I was just up crying constantly.
I remember opening my phone and seeing what had happened. It made me feel absolutely sick. You just couldn't take it in. We all found it horrific, not just how she'd been killed, but the fact that her body had been dumped like half an hour away in some woodland. I didn't even want to go in that area or even think of driving anywhere near there at that point. And then the more you were reading about it, the more looking at what had happened, it's like each little bit of extra information that come out of it, it just got worse and worse.
We now, no doubt, we have got a murder.
Hi, I'm Claire Lewis from The Star, and I'm reporting from Barnsley this afternoon, following the discovery of a body in the Brierley area of the town yesterday. Although formal identification is yet to take place, police believe the body to be that of 29-year-old Abby Fisher.
Just 48 hours after having been reported missing, the body of new mum Abby Fisher has been found 12 miles from her home.
The body was discovered in undergrowth in a wooded area off Southmore Road. Police want to hear from anybody who saw anything suspicious, particularly motorists who may have dashcam footage.
We know that Abby was killed at some point between July 8th and July 9th. There were quite serious marks on her neck, which were typical of being strangled. And there were also defence injuries as well to the rest of her body, so her arms, her legs, and also her stomach as well.
But as Abby's friends and family reel from the news of her death, they are horrified when within 24 hours, police make an arrest.
I remember when our friend told our group that Matthew had been arrested. I felt sick.
You want to cry, you want to be sick, you want to just not believe it's happened, basically. It takes you a while to sort of reread it, register it again, and it just don't sink in whatsoever.
I remember once I told my partner at the time that Abby had gone missing. The first thing he said to me, he just said, listen, I don't want to sound horrible, but they do say that if someone goes missing completely out of the blue, the first person you look at is the partner.
Since her disappearance 3 days earlier, West Yorkshire police have been working diligently to piece together the events surrounding Abby's death.
They realised quite early on that things weren't right. And Matthew had come into the centre of the frame as a suspect.
It all started to unravel on the movement of Matthew Fisher's car.
I know they very quickly got onto the CCTV, and he's on the major routes in Castleford. And at a time when he said he was actually in bed, his car was spotted leaving Castleford.
So we know that Abby was reported as a missing person to West Yorkshire Police after 10 a.m. on July 9th. But what we now know is that Matthew had set off from his home at 4 o'clock on July 9th in his car. He travelled first to Lancashire, then we think through Derbyshire and then to South Yorkshire.
So now we're thinking, what's he doing? One of the sites which he obviously stopped at was near Brayley in South Yorkshire, and it was there they found a body at the side of the road in a ditch.
Police believe that in the early hours of the morning, Matt Fisher left the family home with his dead wife's body in the car, finally stopping in an area familiar to him.
He's driven round on this route through, these various different counties, Lancashire, Derbyshire, South Yorkshire, presumably looking for a site to dispose of the body. And he ends up a place in Brayley in an area which apparently he used to play there when he was a kid.
So perhaps there was some sort of recollection that he had of that area, and perhaps he thought it would be an ideal spot to leave Abby's body. He knew the area, he knew where he wanted to go when he set off with Abby's body on that morning.
With Matt as their main suspect, police scrutinise the signal from his phone on the night they believe Abby was killed.
They then start looking at cell site analysis. This is where your mobile phone is turned on. And as you move about the country, your phone connects to retrieve signals from various of the cell sites across the country. And you can track people. So they tracked him, and he went for some hours on various different routes into Lancashire, from West Yorkshire, South Yorkshire. They went in quite a roundabout route. They have tracked his signal and found his wife's body. Obviously, he has lied. And it was then a matter of pulling the pieces together and presenting that evidence to him, that, he was the person who took her from the house. He was the person who had killed her, and he was the person who had actually disposed of her body.
When Matt's barrister speaks to him in custody, Matt can offer no alibi.
It's very difficult because he had no memory of what occurred.
In trying to build up their case further, detectives speak to Abby and Matt's neighbours, who reveal that they were aware of a disturbance in the early hours.
There were some reports of neighbours hearing banging from Abby Fisher's home. Neighbours had told police they'd heard what sounded like an argument.
I think there'd been a lot of noise through the walls, so obviously adjoining neighbours must have heard a lot of violence and arguments that night, which, it just don't bear thinking about, does it?
The information they get from the neighbours allows detectives to estimate when Abby was killed.
If we think that she actually died at the time that the next door neighbours heard the argument between 10:30 and midnight, probably more like midnight, and he didn't leave till 5 in the morning, he sat some time thinking about what he's going to do. Now, he's had ample time to say, OK, I'll just ring the police and say, I just had an argument, I lost it, and, I'm really sorry. Now, he's made a conscious decision that he's going to try and conceal what he's done.
This timeline leads detectives to further troubling conclusions.
We do know that Matthew actually sat with the body for a number of hours before he put Abby in the boot of his car and actually left their 6-month-old daughter at home by herself while he drove from Castleford to South Yorkshire, which is not a short drive. The 6-month-old child was alone in the house for 5 hours while Abby was in the boot of Matthew's car.
And then, when detectives scrutinise Abby's online activity, they uncover more disturbing evidence.
When the police looked at Abby's internet search history, they discovered the search, why does my husband hate me? And can I get counselling on the NHS? Quite a strong term, and to actually Google it, you're thinking, what's going off in this relationship?
It was quite clear that she loved Matthew. You don't sit and Google how to save a marriage if you don't love that person and you want to make the marriage work.
With news of Matt in custody spreading, Talking Castleford turns to the message he had posted on Facebook the day Abby disappeared.
As a journalist, you report on a lot of missing people, but there are cases that begin to snowball, and this unfortunately was one of them. As soon as we knew that Matthew had been arrested, you go back to his Facebook post and you see that he's been asking the public for help in finding his wife, asking people to ring him if they'd seen her.
And at the time, I remember reading it, part of my brain was kind of, that sounds a little bit tone deaf. Like, if it were like my partner, I'd put a little bit more emotion into it, but that's the last, you put that back in, you're like, oh no, it's stress, don't blame him kind of thing.
And we're just all been sent on a wild goose chase basically, because it said my wife's disappeared and put all this stuff on Facebook trying to cover up what had been done.
The community start to question Matt's behaviour in the time since he reported Abby missing.
Matthew's sat at home with Abby's parents watching the news. He knows what's happened, so he has got to act normally as best he can, because he's come up with some sort of plan which he hopes to get away with. So he just carries on as normal as he can be at that moment. He knows what he's done, and he just hopefully he's going to get away with it. But of course, the discovery of Abby's body would change things, because then there will be evidence potentially to connect back to Matthew and to the home. And he's just acting normally as if she's a genuine missing person and he is concerned.
Matthew himself actually went on a walk with Abby's dad as a sort of way of trying to find Abby. Obviously Abby's parents were concerned for her, and Matthew joined in that search, and obviously that was just an attempt to cover up what he'd done. Matthew told Abby's father that she'd been considering taking her own life. So he's here trying to plant these little seeds of doubt and ultimately trying to cover his own tracks.
All that I could keep thinking was, I was sat in that room with a murderer. He was sat at the other side of the room. How on earth?
And then, in an unexpected development, just hours after his arrest, Matt starts to speak.
He accepted that he must have committed the offence, and it was on that basis that he pleaded guilty to it. But he couldn't remember doing it.
And as the gravity of the situation sinks in, Matt's memory begins to return.
Matthew Fisher told the psychiatrist that he'd smothered Abby after snapping after an argument that the pair had had, which centred around Abby saying that she was likely to return to her parents' home to live with her parents, and also it centred around Abby returning back to work as a school teacher. And she'd told Matthew that she was ready to go back to work, she felt like she needed to go back to work, and it sounded like Matthew didn't like that. He wanted Abby to be at home with him ultimately. And obviously Matthew took some sort of issue with that and snapped and ultimately killed his wife.
But as Matt fleshes out his confession in custody, cracks in his account of events begin to show.
What you're saying does not fit the facts at all. She suffered major trauma. Given the circumstances and what the neighbours said, that there was a disturbance, there's more things happening here than he's actually admitted.
Thirty-year-old father of one, Matt Fisher, formally pleads guilty to the murder of his wife Abby. But in court, the inconsistencies in his story become glaring.
Because his answers don't actually fit in with the forensic and pathological evidence.
Matthew told the psychiatrist that he'd snapped and smothered Abby, but the prosecution outlined that didn't really explain the injuries that Abby herself had suffered. There were quite serious marks on her neck, which were typical of being strangled.
He said that he smothered her with her t-shirt, which was not confirmed by the forensic evidence of the pathologist, who said manual strangulation was the cause of death. You would not have got the injuries to her neck by smothering her with a t-shirt.
Many of Abby's injuries suggest that Matt's account of events may not be true.
She had a lot of soft tissue and blunt trauma injuries, and he gave an explanation to say, one, that she'd fallen down the stairs. Well, given that he's already previously lied about other things, take that with a pinch of salt.
The truth is far more sinister.
There were also defence injuries as well to the rest of her body, so her arms, her legs, and also her stomach as well. So the judge actually said that Matthew had, from what it sounded like, submitted Abby to quite a serious assault and ultimately killed her in the family home.
But with Matt's guilty plea, he is not obliged to explain.
Because I suspect he would know that if he went for diminished responsibility, temporal insanity, then he would have to answer those difficult questions that he didn't want to answer, which is, why did you say you smothered her when you strangled her? And why has she got all these injuries? Why say she fell down the stairs when she clearly didn't? Because she's got defence injuries. You were attacking her and she was fighting back, and you then brutally placed your hands around her throat and you strangled your wife until she was dead. He don't want to answer those questions. He just wants to hide away in prison and make himself believe that he ain't as bad as he actually is.
The evidence against Matt is overwhelming.
I remember hearing that he'd wrapped her in a blanket and duct taped the blanket kind of closed and things like that.
We heard from the prosecution that police found fingerprints on gaffer tape next to Abby's body.
There was no way that he were going to deny what had happened, because they found a can beside Abby that had his DNA on it, so that he'd obviously had a drink once he'd disposed of her body, so there was no way that he could have denied it.
The prosecution's case was that this was a violent murder that ultimately Matthew would try to cover up in the early stages, because it was actually Matthew that made the missing persons call to police in the first place, told them that his wife was missing. And obviously that was just an attempt to cover up what he'd done and to try and cover his tracks. He then phoned Abby's parents, who rushed over to the house, and as he was sat with Abby's parents, Matthew Fisher started to Google West Yorkshire Police, South Yorkshire Police, and also BBC News, and the prosecution told the court that that was a clear attempt to try and find out if Abby's body had been found by the force as he was sat with their parents. So as he was playing the role of a concerned husband, he was trying to find out if what he'd done had been discovered.
Having heard all the evidence, Abby's family make the brave decision to confront Matt in court.
Matthew barely raised his head. He looked at the floor. It was Abby's parents who had the guts really to stand up and to face him and to let him know that what he had done, how it had affected them and what they were going through. And for Abby's mum to stand up and deliver the victim impact statement that she did, and also for Abby's father as well, because he stood up in court, as did her brother. It's still so raw. It's remarkable really, that the bravery that they had to have and just how powerful it was as well is something that stays with you. And certainly Abby's mother's victim impact statement is something that won't leave me for a while, just because of how raw and emotional it was. She broke down a number of times, but she was determined to get through it, and she had things that she wanted to say to Matthew.
You sat there and said nothing, knowing you had killed my baby girl. You dragged her through the undergrowth and dumped her in the woods where you played as a child. Everyone was desperately hoping to find our daughter, and you knew she was dead. You killed my baby girl. What the hell gave you the right to do that? Her death has changed our lives immeasurably. I've missed my daughter so much.
It was a very passionate and tearful statement that Abby's mother made, and she actually ordered him to look at her. He did briefly, and then put his eyes down and started crying. Of course, he's crying for himself, he's not crying for anybody else.
Abby's mother said that they'd taken him in as their own son for him to live with them in their own home. So we spent 5 years living with them, and Abby's mother said that he'd sat there on July 9th, pretending that he was helping the family in their search for Abby. He sat there knowing that he'd killed her baby girl. Abby's brother said that ultimately Matthew had made the world a darker place because he'd taken Abby's light away from him and away from the world as well.
With the damning evidence laid out in court and the impact statements from Abby's family heard, it is the job of Matt's barrister to offer mitigation in an effort to reduce his sentence.
The atmosphere in the courtroom was obviously very tense with a lot of distressed people. It's never easy on a murder case, quite simply because virtually everyone in the courtroom is there for the victim rather than the defendant. And you obviously have a natural sympathy for their position as well. So when you mitigate on behalf of the defendant, you are always conscious of the family being present. The mitigation on behalf of Matthew Fisher was essentially the fact that he'd pleaded guilty at the very earliest opportunity and that he was remorseful for his actions. Matthew was very distressed by the whole proceedings.
At the court, the hearing that I went to, he didn't say anything about his regrets, his apologies, anything like that. I remember sitting there watching him and thinking, why are you not showing emotion? Like, I couldn't see a single tear at all. He didn't seem to be crying. He was more annoyed with himself. He was upset with himself for getting caught doing something rather than what he'd actually done. But I do know that if he did apologise, it wasn't something that we were going to accept off him anyway, whether he wanted to say he was sorry or not, because it's something that you can't forgive, really.
Matthew Fisher is sentenced to life for the murder of his wife Abby. He will serve a minimum term of 15 years.
So I think we can see by the number of people that have attended at court today to support Abby and her family that she was loved by many, truly loved by many, by her friends and family, by a community, but also by the teachers that she worked with and the pupils that were at school that have also been affected by this crime. The community has obviously been shocked and devastated by what Matthew Fisher did to Abby, and his actions have left Abby's daughter with neither parent, which is truly devastating. Nothing will ever be able to bring Abby back for her mother and father or any of her friends and family or the community. I do hope that the justice given today will give them small comfort. I know it is very small comfort. They would like to be given the opportunity and privacy now to grieve for Abby and to also focus on looking after Abby's daughter and all of their other grandchildren. Thank you.
I remember the only emotion I was feeling at the time was absolute rage. I remember talking to my friends and things like that. Says, I don't even feel pity for him. There's no, oh, I feel so sorry for him now that you're going to have to go sit in a prison cell, not see your child, you've lost your life. I just remember thinking, you've done this, you deserve it.
Whatever was going off in their marriage at that moment in time when this happened, he had choices. He could have said, go stay with your mum, take the baby, and a few days, and, let's talk things through. I don't know. But what I do know is the story he gave was wrong, it was false, and it was given to hide the real truth that only he knows.
We've had to fill in the blanks ourselves. We thought that maybe he was jealous of his daughter because she was getting all the love, all the attention. He was used to it just being him and Abby. So we're thinking, well, maybe has he got jealous of his own child, and is that something that triggered him and wound him up one day and he just couldn't control himself?
This is not something that happens every day. This is something that stays with people who lived on the same street, people who knew Abby as well, who joined in the search for her. This is not something that leaves a community very quickly. And Abs was a mum, daughter, sister, and ultimately this is something that any family could go through.
The reaction, obviously, in a case of this nature is it's very distressing for everyone that is involved. The family were clearly and understandably very, very distressed. It was a tragic case for all concerned.
You read about these things and you see crime documentaries and everything else, but you'd never ever believe that it could happen to somebody in your network. But people that are very close to Abby, such as daughter and a family, and that they'll never be the same again, will they?
That little girl's going to grow up and find out that her mother was murdered by her father. So he has damaged everybody's lives. Everybody's. It's just a tragedy all the ways round, and a tragedy that you just feel should never have happened. If only he'd said, OK, go to your mother's. We'll work things out later.
Her loss is definitely, it's put a massive hole in the family. The fact that they've got their grandchild left behind. The little girl, she just looks the absolute double of her mum, and she's got the personality of her already. And I think that is the only thing that's been holding them together, because they have to be strong for the daughter. I choose to focus on all the happy memories that I have with Abby. I definitely try to focus on the positive things, and a little girl's definitely got a lot of aunties that'll definitely help her to remember who her mum was.
The body of a female had been located in the grounds of Ley Green Farm. We could see that she had a clear wound to her neck. It was a bloodletting scene. There are no eyewitnesses. There is no CCTV. There's no doors that we can knock on. This is going to be a real whodunit.
There was a fear that there might be this crazed killer on the loose.
The husband has found the body of his wife. Have they had a row that he's actually ended up killing her? We know that she had been married on 4 previous occasions.
She'd obviously had quite an acrimonious split.
Was it a robbery that had gone wrong? Or it could be some random person. You've got a killer who is picking on people with a knife and killing them in broad daylight.
In Hampshire, on the southeastern edge of the New Forest, lies the small village of Bewley.
When people think of Bewley, they think of what a beautiful old village it is, quiet and peaceful. It's quite a bright and cheery place. It's lovely.
Bewley's very unique. We're surrounded by parkland, and we've also got the river that comes into the middle of Bewley village.
Cyclists and hikers are always around, and people do come to Bewley just to walk around the town. It's so beautiful.
It's in the New Forest National Park, so we have animals, donkeys, horses, cows, and in autumn, pigs roaming the village.
And they are one of the attractions of the visitors. They like to be photographed standing next to one of the donkeys. When I was growing up in Bewley, it was a sleepy village. It wasn't until the 1950s that Lord Montagu opened a motor museum, and of course that started attracting a lot of people.
The houses with the red doors belong to the Montagu estate, and all the other coloured ones are privately owned. A lot of people have lived here a long while.
I've lived in the village of Bewley for 30 years. Yeah, we all look out for each other.
It's idyllic. It's a beautiful, beautiful spot where not much happens. As a local reporter, normally if I'm doing anything about Bewley, it's about speeding motorists and animal welfare.
I've never come out here at all in my 30-year career to investigate any type of crime, and in particular murder. So around about 6 p.m, I was at home, and I remember my phone ringing, and I knew if I'm getting a call out of hours, something bad has happened. And sure enough, a body of a female had been located in the grounds of Ley Green Farm under suspicious circumstances.
She was found by her husband just after 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
He had arrived at the scene here to meet his wife, who had been tending to her horses just in this field over here.
He got to the field and he'd seen her lying down with her top sort of half up, and he thought she was sunbathing, and he'd actually walked towards her and gone, "Come on, you can't be sunbathing all day."
But as he approached her and got closer, he could see that she was lifeless, and in fact there was blood coming from around her neck.
He suddenly realised what he was actually seeing. The shock from something so, get up, stop sunbathing, to suddenly realising your wife has been attacked must have been horrendous for him.
He immediately called the emergency services. Local police ascertained that this was an unexplained death.
The body is that of 47-year-old Penny Davis.
We established quickly from speaking to the husband that the victim lived locally in Blackfield, which is just down the road.
When I spoke to Penny's family, it was extremely emotional. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm a stranger, so it can't be easy to lay yourself bare and for me to ask, questions about what your mum, what your wife was like. From speaking to her family, Penny Davis was a very loving, hard-working woman who seemed to be very loyal to her family, very supportive to her husband, her new husband. Penny's children spoke admirably of their mother. She was there for everything, it sounds like. A lady who liked to get hands-on with her family, and one of her daughters said if she could be half the mother her mum was to her own kids, then she would be very happy. Penny Davis was a woman who just liked life. She seemed to be in a happy place and enjoyed her horses.
Penny had a job in the local Sainsbury's. She was a mother of 5, and there was nothing unusual about Penny at all at that point. We've got control of the crime scene. You know, we have closed it down, that we have a cordon in place. So when the pathologists initially attended the scene, they did a visual examination of Penny. Penny had a clear wound to her neck. Penny's horses were still roaming around the field. And what the pathologist shared with us was that actually they have had experience whereby a horse has reared up, causing a similar injury to the neck with the sharpness of their hooves. However, I was keeping an open mind that, you know, we need to treat this as an unexplained death until we've had the post-mortem results. So having assessed the scene, we're not afforded with lots of forensic evidence. There is no CCTV.
There were no apparent witnesses to the actual incident itself. With that, it was challenging to establish what had happened.
I remember actually saying to the guys, you know, this is going to be a real head scratcher, you know, this is a real whodunit. And then close to Penny's body, very close to Penny's body, was a car key and a £1 coin next to a pool of blood. So that was significant. And so the obvious question is, well, whose car key is that? And I was told that it was a Skoda car key. Well, what car does Penny drive? I was told it was a Toyota Land Cruiser. But actually we had the husband who had turned up at the scene, and he actually turned up in a Skoda. She'd only been married 3 months. So initially I'm already thinking this could be quite suspicious. You know, the husband has found the body of his wife in a very sort of secluded area. Have they had a row and that he's actually ended up killing her? And now he's making excuses as to how he's found the body. And I couldn't rule her husband out as potentially being a suspect.
When the post-mortem report is returned, it confirms Penny's death is not accidental.
What the pathologist had found was that Penny had in fact been stabbed multiple times.
Penny Davis was ferociously attacked. She was stabbed 13 times. She received 6 stab wounds to her chest and torso area. All of those could have been fatal blows.
It was clear we are dealing with a murder investigation.
Although at this stage details are scarce, rumours of the suspicious death quickly spread around the village.
The police kept their cards very close to their chest. I mean, there were rumours hanging around, but no definite news at all.
I think there was a level of fear among people that there might be this crazed killer on the loose.
We hadn't encountered any crime of this magnitude ever in my lifetime. And of course, when one hears that there has been a murder in our village, one tends to wonder whether the murderer could still be around us, either living in our community or in the fields, woods around. So this was of considerable concern to us.
Nobody knew what had happened. Why should it happen in such a place like this? It's not heard of normally around here.
By now, the village are talking that there's a lot of police activity at Ley Green Farm. You know, they would have heard whispers that a body of a female may have been found. And now we have to confirm that this is in fact a murder investigation and there may be a killer in their village.
In the picturesque village of Bewley, detectives are investigating the murder of Mum of 5, Penny Davis.
Was it a robbery that had gone wrong? Well, actually, when we look back at Penny's car that was parked just at Ley Green Farm there, the handbag was visibly on show, so no one had gone for her car to take her handbag, so we could confidently rule out robbery. So we really wanted to know why this had happened, and more importantly, who had done this.
When it first happened, obviously Hampshire Police were sort of trying to find any witnesses. Of course, this is such a remote area, there's no CCTV. All they had to go on really was a car key and a £1 coin.
One of the lines of inquiry is what's called a victimology. And that is really going through the victim's past with a fine-tooth comb to see if there's any little secrets within their life that perhaps close family members may not even know about. Anything that might help us understand why someone will want that person dead. And this is going right back through Penny's history to find out if she's had any particular run-ins with anyone. Has she been threatened in the shop, for example? When we were speaking to Penny's family, we try and elicit who would want to do this to your mother, who would want to do this to your wife. And the family just couldn't come up with anyone that had a beef with Penny that would want her dead.
But the family do disclose a seemingly innocent piece of information.
Penny had moved her horses from their previous paddock in Romsey to Lake Green Farm.
Penny had only been using Lake Green Farm for the last 5 days. She'd moved her horses and because she'd had a falling out with the owners of that stable. So it could be that, the previous stable owners may be involved in this.
If this was a targeted attack, then the killer knew where to find Penny.
We know that Penny had been married on 4 previous occasions. Are they still in touch? Is there a reason why they might want her dead? We found out, having looked at Penny's past, that she had a previous partner who she was together 7 years with. They split up. It was quite acrimonious. They all lived together as a family unit. He had his own children, and obviously Penny had her children. And we know that things weren't always happy within that household.
And Paul must consider one further terrifying scenario.
It could be some random person. If that's the case, that really ramps up the ante because you've got potentially a killer in the village who is just randomly picking on people with a knife and killing them in broad daylight.
As detectives follow multiple lines of inquiry, house-to-house visits continue.
We established that the local river warden, Tony Norris, was out and about in the area at the particular time.
Tony is someone who's very much works within the community, knows what's going on, is very much got an eye for what is in the right place and what isn't.
And we felt sure that if Tony had seen something, that was going to be crucial.
The river warden's job is to ensure that there are no poachers. So I have to walk up and down the banks probably once a day just to check everything is okay. On the Tuesday afternoon, I left home about 2:45 and was driving past Lake Green Farm, and I noticed a silver hatchback car parked by the bridge. Now, 9 times out of 10, I would have turned round and gone to investigate, but for some unaccountable reason, on this occasion, I didn't. And this was, of course, about the time of the murder itself. I came back about 6:30 with the idea of doing some fishing on the river, and I noticed that this silver hatchback car was still parked there. I became very suspicious at this point because an unoccupied car wouldn't be parked there for such a long period of time unless the person was up to no good. Or possibly, of course, it could have been a car which had broken down and the driver had gone to seek assistance.
Suspicious as to why the vehicle is there, Tony takes a closer look.
I was actually looking to see if there was any fishing gear there. There's no reason for anyone to park on Hertford Bridge unless they were possibly going fishing. And since, of course, it's completely private, I concluded that there's a fair chance that the driver of that car could be poaching. I've got a very poor memory, so I took a photograph of the car showing the registration number, and I could use that in the event of me discovering that it was actually a poacher. I left it at that, and I got my fishing gear out, crossed the road, and set up all my gear. And a few minutes after I started fishing, a garage pickup truck arrived, and my suspicions were allayed that it was nothing out of the ordinary. I wasn't very successful with my fishing, so I packed up and went home, and thought nothing more of the evening's proceedings. The police requested that we had a meeting. We sat down in my upper drawing room and we discussed what I had seen. I did mention that I had taken a photograph of a car, and it was that they were very interested in. And they said, "I'm going to have to seize your camera."
I was interested because, we had a vehicle that was close to the scene of where Penny's body had been found. So we checked the registration number, and it comes back to a local female. She is known to the police, but it's very low level, sort of antisocial behaviour type stuff. The chances are the vehicle has broken down and it's been recovered. So I asked officers to go and speak to the owner of that vehicle.
And it was established that she had lent the car to a local male called Justin Robertson.
So we checked with our police national computer. And Justin Robertson was on our system as a low-level thief. Convictions for robbery, I believe, burglary, a little minor drug dealing and that kind of stuff, but certainly nothing of violence that would suggest that he would potentially be responsible for Penny's death.
When officers locate the vehicle, it appears it has been recently cleaned.
And so you're starting to become a little bit suspicious. But obviously we want to speak to Justin Robertson. Why was he in the area at that particular time? Why had the car been recovered? He may well be a witness. He may have seen somebody suspicious coming out of that field. But obviously, on the other hand, he could well be involved in the murder. Justin Robertson was a bit of a nomad. He was a bit of a sofa surfer. And so we were desperately trying to locate him. But to all intents and purposes, he had vanished.
As detectives try to locate the elusive Robertson, Paul is back in the major incident room when he overhears a discussion about the Skoda key found right next to Penny's body.
There's a hive of activity like it is in any murder incident room. And then you could hear that there was a conversation going on just outside of my office between the crime scene manager and a colleague of his. And one of them said, "What car was it that the husband drove?" And somebody shouted out, "Skoda." And then the next thing they said, "Well, but this is a Vauxhall key."
And of course, his ears pricked up because he knew that was the make of the car that Tony Norris had taken a photo of on the bridge over the river that very day that Penny's body was found.
And as soon as I heard that, I was straight out of the office and saying, "What did you just say?" And they said, "The key at the scene is a Vauxhall key. It's not a Skoda key." And obviously I'm then thinking about the Zafira that Tony Norris has seen, and then all of a sudden, that is the key to the investigation. The first thing I asked myself is, well, who told me it was a Skoda key? How did we get to that? I guess the symbols are fairly similar from a Skoda to a Vauxhall. It's an easy mistake to make. But I was kicking myself because one of the first things you're taught is ABC, which is accept nothing, believe no one, and challenge everything. And unfortunately, I didn't do that when I first went to the crime scene. I accepted that it was a Skoda key, and we put 2 and 2 together and came up with 5. And it wasn't until I was told that it was a Vauxhall key at the crime scene that I realised how significant Tony's discovery was.
I think at this point, the police really thought they had something to hook onto.
So now, having established that the key next to Penny belonged to the Vauxhall Zafira, that explained why it was being towed away, because the key had been lost. I could only assume that the murderer was driving that Vauxhall Zafira and dropped the key during the attack. And so Justin Robertson, being the driver of that vehicle, he moved from a person of interest to a suspect in a murder investigation. The priority was to get hold of Robertson as quickly as possible and bring him into custody. This is somebody who we believe is dangerous, who may be armed, and who may kill again.
In the New Forest village of Bewley, detectives investigating the murder of Penny Davis have a suspect. Justin Robertson. The key to a car he was driving was found next to Penny's body. But things aren't adding up.
There was no link between Justin Robertson and Penny Davis. So by now there's all sorts of scenarios being played out in my mind as to what has happened here. Has Robertson dropped the key innocently, walking through the field, and then Penny had been murdered afterwards? Robertson didn't really have any previous convictions to suggest that he was capable of this type of violence. And there was no connection between him and Penny, so why would he do this? The priority was to get hold of Robertson as quickly as possible. And so officers were looking at all of his associates, could he be sofa surfing? We were getting warrants, we had firearms teams going through various addresses looking for Robertson, and eventually we came out with a phone number that we could attribute to Justin Robertson.
I think it was police looking through the mobile phone records of Justin Robertson that they realised that he'd made a number of calls to the same number.
Leading up to Penny's murder, probably for about 2 weeks, there was a lot of conversation going on with a particular number. And then as soon as Penny's body had been discovered, all communication on that number had stopped. And so for me, that was really, really interesting. We found that the phone was registered to a lad called Ben Carr. We wanted to know whether there was any link between Ben Carr and Penny Davis. I remember then speaking to the family, do you know these two individuals? One is Justin Robertson, and they looked at me blankly and said, we've never heard of Justin Robertson. And I said, and what about Ben Carr? And then they went, Ben Carr? He was our previous stepbrother. Mum used to be married to his dad. And then, suddenly you're thinking, hang on a minute, we've got a link at last. There is a link between Ben Carr and Penny Davis and Justin Robertson.
Penny had quite an acrimonious split from the father of Ben Carr. Benjamin Carr was Penny's stepson. It doesn't sound like they had the best of relationships from the off, really, which obviously got more and more strained.
We established that Penny had made an allegation against Ben of sexual assault against some young girls in the past. That was investigated and didn't go anywhere, but it clearly caused a rift between Penny and Ben Carr and his family.
Penny and Ben's relationship got to a point, due to allegations made by Penny against him, that he had to leave the house.
He was being ostracised by the family. It was getting a very, very tense atmosphere within that family unit, and so that was a potential motive.
But Penny's family are not convinced.
Animosity between Ben Carr and Penny was years ago. This had all kind of fizzled out as far as the family were concerned. They'd all moved on. Ben was no longer a part of their life. They hadn't seen or heard from him for a number of years. And so we wanted to know, why would Ben Carr want Penny dead?
The pieces of the jigsaw are not falling into place for detectives, and so they dive deeper into Penny's history.
As is usual in any homicide investigation, we do searches of the family home. We see diaries, laptops and phones belonging to the victim that might give us more information to see who's contacted, the victim. Has there been any falling out with anyone? And lo and behold, what we came across was a conversation between Penny and a female that had taken place on Facebook Messenger. This conversation had taken place at around about 2 o'clock in the morning, and I can only describe it almost as a drunken rant on Penny's behalf. She had reached out to a female who was due to be marrying Ben Carr's father. And in effect, what she had said was that, do you know what you're getting yourself into? Ben Carr has committed sexual assault in the past. I'm going to get him arrested for this. I'm going to ruin your wedding day.
Penny was threatening to go back to the police and sort of renew those allegations against Ben Carr.
So now, having examined this rant from Penny, we could show that there were a lot of things at risk now.
The motive for Ben Carr was to silence Penny Davis once and for all, so that she couldn't rekindle the allegations that she'd previously made.
And when police look at the timing of the online messages Penny sent, alongside the phone calls between Carr and Robertson, there is a clear correlation.
There was a build-up, a contact from the time that Penny had sent this rant on Facebook. We saw the conversation started to pick up between Robertson and Ben Carr, and then the day that Penny is found dead, all that conversation stops. And so it has to be linked. And for me, it's showing a clear conspiracy between these two parties.
It is now 3 days since the murder of Penny Davis.
Day one, we had just a body in a field and very limited information to work with. By day 3, we now had 2 named suspects. We had Justin Robertson and we had Ben Carr, and I had officers out there actively looking for both parties.
Within hours, Ben Carr is arrested on suspicion of Penny's murder.
He didn't kick off, he didn't protest his innocence, he just came in cool and calm, and to my surprise, he went no comment. If you're not involved in this horrific crime, then surely you're going to tell the officers you're not involved. But what he actually did do was provide a prepared statement. It was words to the effect of, I didn't kill Penny Davis, I do know who she is, and I was at the gym that day, and that was it.
Needing to confirm Ben's alibi, police attend the gym where he claims to have been working out at the time of Penny's murder.
And sure enough, officers find that he'd swiped into the gym with his membership card, but not only that, we'd found him on CCTV. Now, the challenge for us was that the CCTV actually put him in the gym at the material time when Penny was being killed. And we knew that even if he had a helicopter, he couldn't get from the gym to Bewley and back again.
Ben Carr was interviewed over several days, and there was insufficient evidence at that stage because of the explanation that he had provided to charge him with an offence.
I had to release Ben Carr on bail. But obviously we've got Robertson still out and about, and what I couldn't have was Ben Carr speaking to Robertson and telling him what information's already been disclosed to him, because that might help him build a defence. And so, I really needed to ramp up the operation to try and get Justin Robertson in.
Hampshire Police launched a huge manhunt to find Justin Robertson.
We had armed officers going around, various associates that may be allowing Robertson to lay low at their address.
The police knew that he had links to a drug dealing network throughout Southampton. They knew people who maybe would be sheltering him. They knew that someone would have information that would finally give Justin Robertson up.
We have information to suggest he was down at Hythe Marina on a boat, and just as we went onto the boat, he had then moved on from there. And so he was just one step ahead of us.
Despite a massive manhunt, Justin Robertson, the man believed to be instrumental in the murder of Penny Davis, is eluding police. And then the investigation takes an unexpected turn.
I got a phone call, and it was from a solicitor who said that they were representing Justin Robertson and he will be giving himself up that evening.
Well, the police, I don't think they could have possibly imagined that after a couple of days, Justin Robertson would have actually handed himself into the police station in Southampton. I think that was quite shocking.
Justin Robertson is questioned under caution.
I thought he would probably make the officers work for it, but to my surprise, he began talking straight away.
That day, she left me in the car. I drove that out to Bewley, parked it on that bridge.
He admitted that he had borrowed the Vauxhall Zafira. He admitted that he had parked it up on the bridge.
There's like a house, I think, round here, big house, loads of sheds. Obviously I was having a mooch in the daytime to go and have a look for things, and then at night time you go and rob it.
And what he was saying was that I was in the area because I was looking for houses to burgle.
Somewhere between this bridge here and this place out here, there was I thought I'd lost the key. At no point did I see that lady. There was 5 horses in that field. After I've gone back to the car. Yeah. Obviously I found out I didn't have the key then.
He was trying to be clever, you know, he thought that he could give a reasonable account as to why he was in the area. When you watch him in the interview, he's very chatty, almost cocky.
Some people describe me as a rogue. Some people describe me as a nobody will ever describe me as a murderer.
Robertson made it really easy for us because he had put himself in that car. He could have said it had been stolen, but he was confident enough to say, I was in the area, but I didn't kill anyone. What we then disclosed to him during the interview was actually we have got the key, and it's been found inches away from Penny Davis, who'd been stabbed multiple times. So what have you got to say about that? He then went no comment because I think he realised that actually, you know, the game was up. He'd run out of lies, and he was charged with Penny's murder.
And then detectives uncover a crucial piece of evidence.
We're looking at Penny's last movements. We've got CCTV of her leaving her workplace, getting into her vehicle, and then driving to Ley Green Farm. And what we noticed, not on the day of the murder actually, but the day before, we could see the wheels of Penny's vehicle. But what we also noticed, that effectively in convoy with Penny's vehicle were the wheels of a Vauxhall Zafira. So we would say that Penny was being followed by Justin Robertson the day before and potentially was due to die that day.
This raises the question as to why the murder was not carried out the previous day.
We now know that Penny was actually with her daughter at that particular time, and therefore we think the operation was aborted as a result of a witness being present.
It's a chilling thought, and in the minds of detectives, it indicates Robertson's premeditation to cause harm to Penny Davis.
Let's say Justin Robertson was in the area at the time and he was going to commit a burglary, and he got spooked by Penny and decided to attack her because he didn't want to get caught for a burglary. This now shows that actually no, this was a targeted attack. Penny was being followed to a location that only a few people knew that she would be going to, and therefore it had to be somebody who knew Penny quite well to say that she works in this location and she keeps horses at this location.
And Paul believes that person is already known to police.
Ben Carter certainly would have been privy to the information of where Penny worked, and so by now it's starting to show that this was a conspiracy and Ben Carr has put Justin Robertson up to it. And so because Ben Carr was on bail, I decided that we would rearrest him, and he was charged with conspiracy to murder Penny Davis.
2 people had been charged with Penny's murder, and obviously we popped that straight on air to let people know that this person had been caught.
As the trial commences, Paul and his team have concerns about the body of evidence they are about to present.
What we don't have is forensic evidence linking Robertson or Carr to Penny's murder. And don't forget, it was quite a bit of blood at that scene. Those jury members are expecting forensic evidence.
It's always a tricky situation when you don't have the forensic evidence in a case.
But things start well for the prosecution.
We get a stroke of luck because, to my surprise, what Ben Carr said was, I do know Justin Robertson, I do know Penny Davis. He said, I'd had a falling out with Penny, she was threatening to disrupt my life, so he agreed to pay Justin Robertson £1,500 to go and find her and warn her off.
He indicated that he had hired Justin Robertson, but not to kill Penny Davis, but to scare her.
And Carr knew what buttons to press to persuade Robertson to do this for him.
Ben Carr stated to Justin Robertson that Penny Davis had abused him when she was in a relationship with his father, but there was no substance in relation to those allegations.
Justin Robertson has this hatred for sex offenders, and that was the ignition that Robertson needed to go off and lose his temper with Penny Davis.
Carr goes on to explain how the man he paid to put the frighteners on his former stepmother ended up killing her.
He says Robertson was wearing a balaclava and that the balaclava was then removed by Penny during a struggle. Robertson then lost it and stabbed her multiple times. But, that certainly wasn't part of the plan. Robertson is the one who's taken it too far. That is nothing to do with me.
It is then Justin Robertson's turn to take to the stand.
He was cocky, he was looking up at the public gallery and winking, and the family are there with Penny. It's the most distasteful thing I've ever seen in a courtroom.
Justin Robertson's behaviour was described by the judge as offensive and a misguided attempt at bravado.
Robertson tries to refute Ben Carr's version of events.
Justin Robertson said that Ben Carr was lying in order to drop him in it and to blame him solely for the murder and to get himself off the hook.
So Justin Robertson's defence was that he'd gone to the field to case the area for burglaries and that he knew nothing about Penny's death, and all of a sudden two supposed conspirators had ended up being absolute foes and they were just throwing mud at each other during the court case.
The prosecution then bring out a witness whose evidence will wipe the smile from Justin Robertson's face.
We had a witness that would testify that Justin Robertson visited her on the evening of Penny's murder.
He said to her that he'd killed somebody. He went into her kitchen and pulled out a knife, indicating that that was the similar sized knife to the one that he'd used to stab Penny Davis multiple times.
And actually the measurements were similar, that the pathologist could show it was a knife of that kind of size. Really caused him some issues. So he had nowhere to go to say he didn't stab her, because a witness said that he'd confessed to doing exactly that.
With the evidence laid out in court, it is time for the jury to retire to consider their verdict.
And I start reflecting then on kind of how the trial's gone. Robertson had given evidence. He wasn't a credible witness at all. He was cocky. He tied himself up in knots. But Ben Carr was quite well spoken. He was respectful towards the judge and the jury. He was well polished. Were the jury going to fall for that?
But the jury see beyond Carr's slick exterior.
The jury deliberated for 16 hours and returned verdicts of guilty in respect of both. Carr was found guilty of conspiracy to murder and received a sentence of life imprisonment with a minimum tariff of 30 years. Justin Robertson was found guilty of murdering Penny Davis and received life imprisonment with a minimum tariff of 32 years.
I remember Robertson, I think, just shaking his head but smiling, and I think Ben Carr just dropped his head and started weeping. But my eyes were then drawn straight up to the public gallery where I could see Penny's family, who were extremely relieved and very emotional, to say the least.
It all comes down to money at the end of the day. Justin Robertson would do anything for a quick buck, and Ben Carr had said that he'd quite happily pay him £1,500 to murder Penny.
But there is one final twist in this case.
When we searched Ben Carr's house, we actually found a roll of money that added up to £1,500. And when we examined that money, it turned out to be counterfeit. And so it just goes to show what these people are like, the lowest of the low as far as I'm concerned.
So this is the echo of the April the 22nd, 2015. I was then able to read what Inspector Barton said here. It wasn't until we heard about the car on the bridge from Mr. Norris that alarm bells started ringing. He had the sense to take a picture of it. To have a photo was perfect. It pleased me that I was actually able to make some contribution in the successful solving of what is a pretty ghastly crime.
There was a real sense of pride for me and my team having had this result. But what was particularly sad for me was that ultimately we had a husband that lost his wife, we had parents that lost their daughter, and we had children that lost their mother.
And they carried themselves, their family, so honourably throughout that whole trial.
It is not them, but us, Penny's family, who have been given a real life sentence. The life of someone precious to us, a mother, daughter, wife and sister, has gone, and she can't be replaced.
Penny's husband was very emotional afterwards. You know, he loved her so much, and he was broken by this. He found his soulmate, and then she was cruelly taken away from him. And like he says, he will never get over this.
Yo, có phong trang is cool, lông cú xếp gì nhọc đầu lộc nít, cú chop nục lô sleep, bro, hope lúc nít, smooth draw high stop nose, nhập hậu trôi kẹp nọc, cú bập chi cú nose, sis mùi kẹp nọc, mùi kẹp xiêm kẹp trong nose, rồi cũng sוף, cú chỉ số tuần rock trong high school, cú khăn nọc không vội, nhọc đầu lộc nít, cú flip với nhỏ, nose yop trôi kẹp chúc trong mốt, nọc trôi kẹp flip bị trong cuốn size cú phục thú. Nhỏ bro không tạm nét phu Cú tóc cho kẻ Nhóc hậu lúc nhìn chung chấp chính cảm nô Cú high stis nhóc hậu lúc nhìn Cú flu cô nhóc hậu cho kẻ Chia cú thâu phút cho kẻ Trong cú flu cô nhóc cho kẻ Rock trong trên high school cú flu nhìn Nhóc hậu lúc nhìn Mô cú trong cú cho kẻ Trong cú flip goes to spawn Nụ siêu cho kẻ đâu cho kẻ flip Rock rồi có lúc trong nhỏ rau hao cú trong cú cho kẻ Cú chỉ spawn coi cú chỉ flip coi lúc Nhóc hao lúc nhìn chung thấp chính cảm nô Cú high stis nhóc hao lúc nhìn Cú flip goes nhóc hao cho kẹp chia cú thâu phút cho kẹp Trong cú flip con rock cho kẹp Rock trong trên high school cú goes cú flip nè Nhóc hao lúc nít mô cú trong cú cho kẹp Trong cú flip goes to spawn Nhóc hao lúc nhìn chung chấp chính cảm nô Cú high stis nhóc hao lúc nít Nhóc hậu cho kẹp trong trao disco Nhóc hậu lúc nhìn chung chấp trao disco Nhóc có bao cú phao nhóc lúc nhìn